For joining us on this episode of Meanings of the Mind.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us here at Manhattan College and BronxNet for Forward Together, the transition from service member to veteran. I am Tiana Sloan, Director of Veteran Success Programs at Manhattan College, where we are deeply committed to supporting military-affiliated populations with a particular focus on the transition process. With more than 1 million members of the United States military actively serving, and about 18 million veterans nationwide, supporting the transition process is critical. These populations have paid a tremendous service to our country, and they still have so much more to give as they transition to civilian life. We are proud of the role Manhattan College plays in supporting military and veterans. Our campus not only provides the tools for student veterans to succeed, but also to gather and create community. Our veteran success programs focus on well-being, resiliency, fostering community, and career. As such, we are delighted to bring together these national leaders here today to discuss each of these areas and share best practices. Manhattan College's increasing efforts to assist veterans in the transition begins with the leadership of our president, Dr. Brennan O'Donnell. For more than a decade, Dr. O'Donnell has been a champion for student veterans by overseeing the opening of our Veteran Success Center and the expansion of our Veteran Success programs. I would now like to introduce Dr. Brennan O'Donnell.
Thank you, Tiana, for that introduction and for all you do to lead our Veteran Success Program. Let me start with sincere thanks to Michael, Max, Nobby, and the team at BronxNet for partnering with Manhattan College on this important forum. It is truly an honor to be part of a panel that brings together so many leaders in the national efforts to support our veterans. Manhattan College is proud of its long-standing commitment to educating veterans, dating back to our very beginnings in the 1850s. It is a commitment that we have built upon in recent years through our Veteran Success Program, a nationally recognized initiative that has helped us earn a proud spot on Victory's list of military-friendly schools. Today, we gather with experts in the field who have gone above and beyond the call of duty to work with veterans in their transition from military life to civilian life, while providing them with the professional skills they need for a successful career. One of those experts is our very own Dr. Stephen Kaplan, who created the college's Veterans at Ease program, creatively incorporating into a required religious studies course stress reduction and relaxation techniques, building strong and lasting friendships along the way. You'll be hearing much more from Dr. Kaplan later in the program. This time last year, Stephen Kaplan and his team of student veterans took a vacant retail shop at the street level of the iconic Flatiron building and transformed it into an art exhibit that included visual presentations with accompanying narratives, ranging from that of a World War II Marine who fought in Okinawa, to a Gold Star mother, to a post-9/11 82nd Airborne veteran who served multiple tours as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. The participating artists were from 23 states and one country outside the United States. In addition to these stories, we presented our history of supporting our military through images of veteran alumni. The exhibit included, for example, the discharge papers of a Manhattan College Civil War veteran, a letter written from a prisoner of war in a German camp to a Lasallian Christian brother, and artifacts relating to the men and women who have participated in the Air Force ROTC program that we have housed on our campus for almost 70 years. At the Flatiron exhibition, we were very honored to host former Veterans Administration Secretary, Dr. David Shulkin, for a special forum that centered on connecting veterans to a wide array of services. Overall, this exhibit gave a powerful glimpse into the sacrifices that our veterans have made over the years in the name of freedom. One final note. Yes, Our veterans have been serving around the globe, and they have also acted locally, right in their backyard off campus. It was just a couple of weeks ago when a group of 24 student veterans and ROTC cadets banded together to refurbish Memorial Grove in Van Cortlandt Park, a serene and very special place that pays tribute to those local residents who have made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. I'm very proud of our student veterans and all those in our community who are working to support them inside and outside the classroom, assuring that our Veterans Success Program deserves that name. Again, thank you to our panelists, and thank you, BronxNet, for sponsoring this event.
Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell, for your community vision at Manhattan College and continued commitment to veterans. We at BronxNet TV, the public service multimedia network of the people of the Bronx from the Bronx to the world, are proud to partner with Manhattan College on important programs like Forward Together, the transition from service member to veteran. And now, please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul.
Hi, I'm New York Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. I want to take a moment to acknowledge Veterans Day, even if we can't honor this day in person. To our veterans, each of you answered the call to protect our country and keep us safe, and we will never forget that. Thank you to all of you who served at various times in our history and to your families. As we mark the annual observance of Veterans Day, we are called to reflect upon what a grateful nation owes you, our veterans, in return for your sacrifices. First, you deserve world-class health care. And second, the dignity of a good home. Third, access to good employment opportunities. Meeting those needs is personal for me. When I served in Congress, I was a member of the House Armed Services Committee. There I fought to ensure our veterans received whatever care and support they needed, whether they served decades ago or are recently returned. I had 4 uncles serve during the Vietnam conflict, and each wore a uniform when it was not popular to do so. And sadly, neither they nor others who served at that time ever received the hero's welcome that they deserved. That must never, ever happen again. I was also very proud of my father-in-law, Bill Hochul, who during World War II was part of the invasion that landed on Omaha Beach 2 months after D-Day. He was part of a tank battalion that led the campaign across Europe, liberating people. And like so many who served during World War II, he never spoke of his time in the military. After he passed, we found a map that showed his campaign from England to France and across Europe, a living memory of his service. Like him, many of you have kept your stories to yourselves. I respect that. But you need to know that on behalf of Governor Cuomo, myself, and 20 million New Yorkers, we take this day and every day to tell you how grateful we are for what you did to preserve our democracy and our cherished freedoms. We remember what you fought for, the values of freedom, honor, and integrity, and everything that has made our nation the greatest on earth. Happy Veterans Day.
Our first discussion, Ensuring Well-Being and Resilience for Veterans, is on recognizing the physical and emotional challenges of transition stress for service members as they separate from the military. We'll look to share information on the importance of addressing transition stress and tips that veterans can use. Dr. Anthony M. Hassan is President and CEO of the Cohen Veterans Network, providing mental health services at clinics nationwide. Dr. Hassan is a veteran of the United States Army enlisted and an Air Force officer with 30 years of experience in military, behavioral health, serving as a military social work officer, leader, clinician, and academic. He served during Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2004 on the first ever Air Force Combat Stress Control and Prevention Team embedded with the Army. Robin Carnes is the co-founder of Warriors at Ease. Robin served as the yoga and iRest instructor for the Specialized Care Program, a multidisciplinary PTSD treatment program funded by the Department of Defense at the Walter Reed Medical Center. Her pioneering work in integrating yoga and meditation into the military was recently honored by the Smithsonian Institution. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for your continued service, Dr. Hassan. What is transition stress, and why is it so important?
Yeah, well, stress is how we define it. But I think anytime we transition, there's stress, right? So we transition from one military unit to another military unit, one military base to another military base. We transition from home to deployment, deployment to back home. We transition from military to civilian life. Those transitions are stressful in and of themselves. However, when our lives aren't together, when we're not prepared, uh, that stress can be overwhelming. So a lot of the transition stress can be mitigated when we have better planning and preparation.
Robin, thank you for your work on this. Please talk with us about transition stress.
Well, as many people have heard about veterans and often associate with veterans is PTSD. And that is true that, some percentage of veterans have PTSD, but it's actually relatively small. It's important, but small. But to think more broadly that, as Dr. Hassan said, that when you go from a job that's not just a job, it's 24/7 pretty much, that you are kind of have somewhere to be and doing something you're supposed to be doing. For instance, you in the military, you have PT, physical training every day, and it's part of your schedule. You get paid for it, right? You get paid to take care of yourself in that way. Well, when you get out of the military, no one's saying now it's time to go exercise, or now it's time to take care of yourself in this way. So that's just one example of many of the change between a job that's way more than a job, both in meaning and in time, to a situation where you're kind of like, it's up to you. And that might sound good. And like, there's a lot of freedom and autonomy, which is great. And at the same time, that kind of thing, to go from so much structure to no structure or very little structure, can be very overwhelming for people. So I think that's part of why, as Dr. Hassan said, it's very important to anticipate that shift, even if it's something you're really wanting to have happen, and build yourself some structure and some ways of caring for yourself that you may have taken for granted in some ways when you were serving.
And what strategies do you and your organizations employ to deal with transition stress and to help veterans build resilience?
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted to add a little bit more, if I may, to the previous question before I get into solutions, because in my work when I was at the University of Southern California, we studied veterans after service. And there are a number of things I want to highlight, particularly for those that might be listening to this that are planning a transition or are currently in transition, is that many veterans want to handle everything on their own. And they'll quickly realize that when everything is fine and stable, it's not so easy when things are falling apart to be able to handle things on your own. The strong military bond and the strong military support that Robin was speaking to, the rituals, the structure, that helps. But when you enter the civilian world where you're unfamiliar with all of your surroundings, those protective factors that you had before are no longer there, and it makes you more vulnerable. And so what we learned when I was at USC and we did all these studies, 2/3 of veterans have difficulty adjusting to life when they get out and become civilians. And a lot of that has to do with their preparedness. 1/3 of them have less than $5,000 to use as they transition. So financially, they're not prepared. Many of them, if not more than 40%, really don't have permanent housing. They're either staying with family, and that tends to run out after a while, or they're staying with a friend. 5 out of 10 have some kind of physical or mental health challenge that they didn't address when they were in. You see, we constantly look past these things, and then all of a sudden, there they are in our face because all of our protections have dropped, and now we have to live with this reality in front of us. And so it's tough. And again, going back to, you're resilient. Yes, you are. You did things, you experienced things, you're stronger because of it. But when you're out of that system, you become very vulnerable. And if you're not prepared, you're extremely vulnerable. And that's where we see transition stress, transition challenges occurring, despite your combat tour or not. Just making a transition from something that you've known to something that you really don't know is tough.
So I would add one more thing, and then I'll answer the question, which is that also when you're in the military, you have a sense of purpose. Like, you know, your job, not only you know what your job is, but it has a sense of like, my life matters in terms of that's one of the things I've learned and have been so impressed by all these 15 years I've been working with people in the military, is their sense of devotion and duty to something higher than themselves or more than themselves. And when you transition to being a civilian, you don't always know exactly what you're going to do right then, right? And you don't always have a clear sense of purpose. And again, that's something that anchors people, is that sense of purpose that we can sometimes, not always, sometimes people aren't so clear about that when they first get out. So now, let me just answer the question about what our organization does. So we work with people both in active duty as well as people who are transitioning and have transitioned. And our key strategy is about having people understand, because obviously we would all know right from the get-go that yoga and the military seem like strange bedfellows, right? Like not an obvious partnership. But it turns out, and we recognized this right away when I was at Walter Reed, and it really was what inspired Warriors at Ease to be founded, that it turns out that the core of what yoga and meditation are really about is helping with self-regulation and a sense of purpose, right? But the sense of that the nervous system under stress can become dysregulated. It can go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And that we cannot just say, nervous system, sleep. It's time to sleep now. And like, if we could, our planet would be a very different planet if we could just tell ourselves to chill out, and we would. But we cannot think our way to a regulated or balanced nervous system. When we're in stress and we lose sleep and our digestion is often disturbed, we can get pain, chronic pain caused by stress, can cause relationship problems, anxiety and depression, and we can't talk ourselves out of it. So we can't reason ourselves out of it. So the essence of yoga and meditation is, as opposed to what you see on billboards and in magazines, which is just a very superficial idea of what it is. We get to the core of it and we talk about it in plain language. This is your nervous system. This is your nervous system on stress. You can get stuck in a stressed position, and it is going to affect your mental and physical health in very serious ways, right? But what can you do? You can actually move in very conscious ways. Yoga, you can breathe in very conscious ways, and you can train your attention in very conscious ways that help you regulate, to go from red alert to a sense of like green, stable, anchored, like I'm my best self here. What kinds of choices do I have in this situation? How, it turns on my creative abilities when my nervous system is balanced. I see options I didn't see before, and I'm not caught and controlled by necessarily bad choices I might have made before. So I would just say self-destructive choices, unhealthy habits I might have had before. Whereas when I'm really regulated, body and mind and emotions, I'm going to make different kinds of choices. I'm going to be able to even begin to see a sense of purpose. I'm going to be able to have relationships that are super, that's the ultimate medicine for stress, is feeling bonded and connected to other people. So that's what Warriors at Ease does, is strip out the woo-woo of yoga and meditation. And we say, this is what's happening in a person's nervous system. It's just being a human. There's nothing wrong with it. Everybody needs this. And whether you have a diagnosis of any type or not. And then how do you learn it in a very practical, easy way? And then how do you build it into your life? And that's what we do.
Wow, Robin, I have to tell you, I was skeptical of yoga, and I went with my daughter, and I had the best afternoon nap of my life.
Exactly.
And my wife makes me do meditation every night. And if I don't do it, I don't fall asleep right away. But if I do meditation, I am out and so restful. It's just really amazing. And I was a naysayer, but I'm a believer. So thank you for what you do. In terms of Cohen Veterans Network, we're a network of mental health clinics that are available to veterans, military family members, whomever needs it, who's served. We define family member as anyone the veteran does. And what we're here to do is make sure that when you need help, there's a place you can go. And when you raise your hand, I know how important it is to ask for help. When you raise that hand, we need to make sure you're available. So our number one focus is access to quality mental health care. We're doing that. We've seen over 20,000 veterans or military family members since our inception 4 years ago. About 51% of our clients are veterans, and they're coming for things like transition problems, adjustment problems, anger problems, marital problems. Yes, they're coming for PTSD treatment. Yes, got it, check. But we do see that they're coming for life problems, just like everyone else. And we're seeing great results. So my thing has always been to talk to a soldier, a Marine, a sailor, an airman is, if you don't take care of your challenge now, your behaviors will cause you greater challenge going forward. So it's not the diagnosis, it's your behavior. And so we want to help you understand how you're feeling, why you're feeling that way, but more importantly, what you can do to change your behaviors to improve your life. And I think once someone accepts that and sees it that way, life can be better. But the more you ignore your problem, no matter how big or small it is, it's going to cause you bigger problems down the road. So we're here at the Cohen Veterans Network for them. There's also groups like Headstrong that can help you as well. So we really want folks to reach out and get the help when they need it. There's no excuse for not getting help, because Cohen Veterans Network is available to you via telehealth, no cost, childcare, transportation to and from the clinic, whatever you need. You do not have a reason for not getting help through the Cohen Veterans Network.
In providing these services for veterans, what are some things that communities should know? What should people know about resources that your organizations need to provide these services? And what types of calls to action are you looking to share?
My biggest call to action, and I talk about this often, is that our country needs to do better in making mental health care accessible to anyone, period. It's terrible that people cannot get an appointment for mental health care. There's people waiting 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So if we want to make a difference, if we want to save lives and save families and save the futures of our young people, we need to make sure as Americans that we're able to have accessible, quality mental health care for all of those individuals, because it is our future. And so at the Cohen Veterans Network, our number one focus is making sure that when someone needs help, they get help. So my whole push and advocacy has always been and always will be to make sure that people, when they raise their hand and they need help, that someone's there for them. And so I would advocate very strongly for access to mental health care, access to call hotlines or self-help call lines, peer-to-peer programs, anything that we can do to make sure that someone feels comfortable reaching out, and when they reach out, they get the help they need.
I would say, well, our organization trains teachers very extensively. It's just as important to us that a teacher knows anatomy and physiology to be able to teach somebody how to do a forward bend in a safe way, and any type of body. We've trained people to do yoga who don't have hamstrings. So it's not about how long your hamstrings are, right? It's about the attitude about coming into it with willing. If you can breathe, you can do yoga and meditation. So we train our teachers just as much in the physical aspect of yoga as we do in how to create a classroom that feels inclusive to everybody, no matter what your body, the physical health of your body, if you're missing limbs or you've had amputations or injuries, no matter what, racially, gender-wise, because in our country, yoga is really associated with white women. And we're trying to tear that down and say, no, that is a misunderstanding of what this is about. This is for human beings. This is about human beings who want to have resilience. So when life knocks the crap out of you, you can get up again. And that is not something you get from reading a book. It's something you get from building skills. And those are the skills we're trying to teach our teachers. And so the teachers learn how to create a safe environment for people to be themselves and create community and bonding in that classroom. So it's not competitive. It's not about comparing yourself to other people or some picture of how it's supposed to look. It's about, in this body, in this moment, how can I, do this the best I can, and with compassion for myself. I want to refer to the Manhattan College program because it's a perfect example of Warriors at Ease philosophy. First of all, we partner with, in fact, we're working in some Cohen clinics. We partner with organizations that are providing services and have access to veterans, both active duty and once the transition has happened. But with Manhattan College, we know that Manhattan College and Warriors at Ease knows, as a partnership, that our job is not just to go in there and teach breathing practices. Those are important, and people are incredibly grateful that they might take a great nap or have a great night's sleep for the first time in years. But also to help facilitate the bonding of a group of veterans that we're working with, so that those relationships can feel real and authentic, and that they don't feel alone. And that's the biggest medicine that we can offer, is this feeling of like, I'm connected to other people.
And as veterans transition to civilian life, are there any closing thoughts each one of you might share in thriving and feeling and being well and having a sense of community?
Yeah, as my fellow veterans transition, I want to remind them that there's a great world out here that needs them, needs their resources, needs their leadership. It's just a matter of them being ready and courageous enough to feel good about yourself, to go make a difference, because veterans have what it takes to do very well, and civilians would love to have you on their team. But as a mental health guy, I want to tell you, take care of yourself, be strong, stay healthy, both physically and mentally, and you'll have a great transition and a new career, no doubt.
And I would just echo that and say, take one step. It may seem enormous, the gap between where you are right now and where you want your life to be, but take one step, whether it's showing up at a Cohen clinic or going to a well-trained, appropriately trained yoga class. Not all yoga is great for stress, actually, and not everybody's going to feel welcome. Not all yoga teachers are trained to have people feel welcome in their environment, honestly. But find some place that you feel a bit better when you leave, or a relationship where you feel a bit better after you've had that connection, and do more of that, a little more each day. So just one small step.
It's so outstanding to meet both of you and talk with you. And thank you for sharing these insights and for joining us and for your important and amazing work for our veterans.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you both. And it was a pleasure to be
You're
here.
welcome. Nice
It was great to meet you.
Veterans discuss the importance of finding a sense of community and service after the military. In our next discussion, Leading the Charge, Finding Your Community and Mission. Kirsten Bataccio is a legislative policy analyst at the Missile Defense Agency. She enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps in 2009 and was honorably discharged as a sergeant in May 2015. She studied government and international studies at Manhattan College, where she served as president of the School Student Veterans Organization. Joelle Lynch is co-founder and co-owner of the Tree Army Co., a New York-based business founded on the premise of helping fellow veterans reintegrate into the community. As a United States Army veteran serving from 2004 to 2016, she's a member of the Manhattan College Student Veterans Organization. Zach Iskell is founder of the Headstrong Project, a nonprofit partnered with the Weill Cornell Medical Center to fund and develop comprehensive mental health care programs to treat Iraq and Afghanistan veterans free of cost. A combat decorated former Marine Corps officer, Iskil served 2 tours in Iraq and on other assignments throughout Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia in the infantry and special operations. In 2009, he returned to Fallujah, where he fought in 2004 to film an important documentary. Welcome to all.
Thanks for having us here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Why is community important to veterans as they make the transition to civilian life after military service? And how did you find your community?
Sure. So a little more background on me. I served in the Marine Corps for 6 years. I served overseas 5 of those 6 years. I was in Iwakuni, Japan in the Air Wing first, and I was on embassy duty. So when I was discharged in 2015, not only was I returning back to the States, and I was also returning back to civilian life. So for me, it was a big culture shock. So in the military, in the Marine Corps, I'm sure Joelle and Zach know, it becomes a real culture for us. There's a lot of language we're sharing, there's uniforms we're sharing, there's traditions, there's everything like that we're sharing. We're creating our own culture. So community becomes very important. So when I returned back to the States and when I got discharged from the Marine Corps, it was about finding people that could relate to that culture and then who also could help me assimilate to the new culture and civilian world. So that's really what I was looking for when I was looking for a community upon my discharge and upon my return back, I guess you could say.
I think in the military, we hear this often, it's your military issued family or your military issued life, and you're given all of these comrades, you're given all of these coworkers, you're given a mission, and that's your main focus. And then you come home and it's this shock of, first you're shocked in basic training and going through the military and getting integrated into that, and then you have this shock coming out and coming back home and understanding that the whole world hasn't stopped in your absence.
Look, I think community is really, it's a group of people who show up for each other. You know, when you are in the military, having served in the Marine Corps, I think, I'll say this is true of the other branches too. I'm not going to knock the other services, but you learn to really show up for each other, right? And it doesn't matter what your background is. I think it's one of the things that's so remarkable about the United States military is how that happens. And then when you get out, you know, I think one of the reasons veterans, you know, sort of continue to be sort of attracted to each other is because, you know, one, our community has enormous needs. Right? We're facing a massive suicide epidemic. But at the same time, you have that sense of shared experience and time together. And so it's sort of you find ways to continue to show up for each other, whether it's, you know, just a life event, a wedding, the birth of a child, a new job, helping somebody, providing mentorship, providing guidance, helping somebody either get out of the service, or maybe it's somebody that showed up for you as you were getting out of the service. And so I think it's really just a continuation of that culture of showing up for each other that continues once we get out.
And what about identifying that purpose, that mission? You know, what are some strategies to finding purpose and you know, in that community, and you know, and what are some approaches that veterans can take?
I mean, I think for me, so when I got out, I never expected to continue to do stuff in the veteran space. But I think it comes back to that idea of showing up for each other. And so I served in one of the hardest hit battalions of the Iraq War. We fought in the Second Battle of Fallujah. Over half our battalion was wounded. We lost 33 Marines during that fight. Last year, we lost our 34th Marine to suicide. And, you know, in 2011, as we started to lose more of our own to suicide, you know, you basically realize that we had to do something. So we ended up starting an organization called the Headstrong Project. That's now one of the leading providers of mental health care in this country. We're in 28 cities. We provide world-class treatment that is cost-free, bureaucracy-free, and most importantly, it's effective. But how do you get into that? I think it's just about, there was a need. You saw people that that need wasn't getting met, and you do everything you possibly can to meet it. And so I think that's part of it. Again, it comes down to showing up for each other and showing up where you're needed. And so for me, I had no background in mental health care. I ended up spending a good amount of my time over the last 8 years in mental health care, also building businesses. But that became a big part of my life simply because Marines I served with needed that help. And so did, veterans from other services.
Yeah, I agree with you, Zach. I think coming out of the military, it's so ingrained in you to be there for one another and to stand up for one another and to always have your shoulders back. One of the biggest things that we say in the Army, and I know it's the same in the Marine Corps, is, leave no soldier behind. And when you're reintegrating,
we say leave no Marine behind, but not splitting hairs here.
Not splitting hairs. One team, one fight. So, that's so ingrained in you and in your mission in the military. And then coming out and you're facing your own struggles and you see your battle buddy struggling, and there's a sense of camaraderie. You'll hear so often when someone is depressed and say, oh, you need to snap out of it. You need to this, you need to that. But there's such a strong sense of understanding between one vet and another. In the United States, we have a civilian society, and then we have a warrior society within that. And our entire nation isn't forced to serve. So our entire nation doesn't necessarily understand the warrior mentality and the sacrifices that are made and the struggles that we have and the strength and the resilience that we have. Our vets understand that. And finding that community and finding that group of people in your tribe again is probably the best medicine, the best remedy, the best support network that you can ever have. And I'm honored to say that I have my family that's blood, and then I have my family that's my tribe. And those are my people. And those are the ones that I can turn to at 2 a.m. to talk me off the ledge, or if I need a hand with anything, that's where we turn. And there's an understanding there that is not something that you can buy. It's not something that you can just find. There's a shared mission, shared understanding from shared experience.
I agree 100%. I think it even goes deeper than that as well. I think a lot of people choose to enlist and serve in the military because they bleed altruism. We all kind of share that public service bone from the start if we're deciding to enlist. I think the military absolutely, the culture again of the military absolutely cements that behavior in us. We kind of, everything we're doing is for the team, for the greater good. And so when you get out, you carry that with you. So I think it's something that we all had already, and it's something that is just create even like deeper for us after we leave the military. But I think once we leave, there is a little bit of an identity crisis, and I think it's how are you going to continue serving? How are you going to find people to connect with? And that could be really hard. And it's great to, I think initially when you get out, absolutely find veterans, but then once you find your veteran community, I think it's also very important to find a way for that veteran community to also expand outwards and bridge the civilian and military divide. So I think it definitely is two parts of that, but I agree with everything Joelle and Zach said.
Well, Kirsten, each one of you, you're prime movers in that identifying service and mission and purpose. And I'm sure there are challenges in transition. What are some answers, and through that discovery, through that process, what are the things that veterans should know? What are things that the community at large should know about veterans in transition into civil life and to work?
One of the, being in the veteran space and prior to starting the Tree Army company, I worked in the corporate space, and I did a lot to benefit veterans and lobby for veterans change, lobby for veterans rights, and make a difference there. And I think one of the hardest things that I found with dealing with veterans and also with corporate America is a lack of understanding on how much the veteran population brings to the workforce. What those skills from the military that may not exactly line up, but how much of that leadership ability, that resilience, that adapt and overcome, that accomplish the mission first, the ability to work in a team with the most diverse population you could ever find, the ability to be put in an environment that is harsh, that is time sensitive, that is completely mission oriented, how much that truly does translate to corporate America and into the civilian world, and what a benefit and asset that is to any corporation. I think it's a challenge when you're going for an interview and your interviewee or your employer doesn't necessarily understand why you have gaps in your employment. And that's due to your military service, or if you're in the reserves or the National Guard, being understanding of needing to take time off to serve, if you're called up for a disaster or for a deployment, or even, AT and drills. That's a challenge. And I think that if we can help the civilian world understand that while yes, there are struggles that vets face, there are mental health issues that are brought on by some of the horrors that occur in war. There is a huge asset. We are an asset. We are important. We matter. We are resilient, and we are probably some of the strongest employees that you can find. And I don't mean physical strength. I also mean mental strength and resilience.
I completely agree with what Joelle was just saying. I think, it's important for people to understand that military service members, veterans, bring a tremendous amount to the table. They're team oriented. They're driven. There's an amazing statistic that only 24% of 18 to 24-year-olds meet the criteria to join today's military. Yeah. So the rest are not fit enough. They can't pass the intelligence test. They don't have enough education. They have a history of drug use or other sort of disqualifying factors. One of the things that I always try and talk about when I have an opportunity to talk to veterans, or talk to people that love veterans, or talk to people that are involved in the veterans community, is really about mental health. And, we are facing a massive mental health epidemic, not only within the veterans community, but across the U.S. I think there's a statistic right now that 2/3 of Americans are suffering from depression, anxiety, or other forms of trauma coming out of this pandemic. And what I've learned sort of being around PTSD, having dealt with my own issues coming home from war, is that the lack of knowledge and familiarity about what PTSD is probably killing far more of us than PTSD itself. And I think a lot of people don't understand that all PTSD is the inability to turn off the fight or flight response. When you think about the symptoms, hypervigilance, restlessness, sleeplessness, quickness to react. These are things that cause you to not only survive, but thrive in dangerous situations, right? You think about before a sports game, your heart starts to race, you get a little anxiety, that's your body getting ready to react. And all PTSD is because of trauma, you're not able to turn that off. Some people find that maybe, that anxiety goes away after a beer or two, but they never make the connection that that's called self-medicating. And they never really make the connection that these symptoms that they're facing are not a lifelong sentence, that they're treatable, that you can change the way your brain and your body have reacted to that trauma with the right treatment. And so at Headstrong, we've built a program that provides that care. We now have, probably 800, 900 veterans getting treated on a weekly basis. We have not lost a veteran yet to suicide in 9 years. But more importantly, we found that with the right treatment, people can absolutely recover from hidden wounds. And I think that's not only important for veterans to know, but anybody who has suffered from trauma, or whether it's, spouse abuse, early childhood abuse, a car accident, all the way through combat trauma, that if you get the right help, this is a mental illness that is actually quite treatable, unlike other forms of mental illness that can be more difficult to treat.
As you can tell, there's a lot of issues that veterans need to face, and obstacles veterans need to overcome, and a lot of factors that go into the transition out of the military to civilian life, whether it's professionally, like Joelle was saying, or whether it's mental health, which is super important, as Zach was saying. I think the GI Bill was a pivotal factor in my own success in my transition out. When I was discharged and I began at Manhattan College, I began undergrad, Manhattan College became a space for me to find my identity, to find what I wanted in my professional career, to find my new tribe of friends, veterans and civilians. And it was a space for me to really do all that. It was an academic space, so there was a lot of learning. There was a huge learning curve, but there was also a lot of communication across different avenues and different aisles. We created the Student Veterans Organization at Manhattan College with the intent of, like I was saying earlier, of creating a community of veterans in order to expand out and bridge the gap between civilian and veteran divide. Like, that was our whole intent. And I think the GI Bill and being in an academic atmosphere, I think that really gives veterans the chance to do that, to find their initial veteran tribe, and then to also, begin communicating to the civilian sector, and to be learning how to translate their professional skills, and so that they can get these civilian jobs, and learning how to translate everything that they went through, and so a civilian can hear and understand, and they could actually be heard. I think it's really, really important. I think that's great for mental health. I think it all ties together. But I think not only is college checking the box as far as a degree, I think college is an environment for us to flourish and learn that way. So the GI Bill is a huge gift in that sense, just in the transition out.
I think that's so spot on. And it's also just tying everything that everyone has said together is the GI Bill affords a unique opportunity for veterans who, like, for example, myself, I enlisted when I was right out of high school. I didn't go to college out of high school. And then I spent 12 years in the Army. My entire adult life, I spent in uniform. And going back to college after the military, it is a culture shock. You're surrounded by, 18 to 20-year-old kids. And here I am coming back. I'm grown. I have all this life experience. And what I absolutely loved about having a vets group on campus and being able to have that tribe, that I'm so grateful to you, Kirsten, for creating, was that we all had the same experiences, and the professors were much more understanding, having more than one vet in the group, and having a group that they could, the professors, if they were having a question or they were having, an issue or there was a concern about a student, that they had someone that they could speak to offline and have a conversation about, the best way to handle a situation, as did the veteran, who had someone that could advocate on their behalf if they were struggling or having an issue. And one of the things that absolutely to this day still tickles me is sitting in class with, several other vets and then a bunch of 18 to 20-year-old kids, and feeling like the vets were the only ones speaking, or the vets were the only one who had an opinion or something to say or something, to chime in. And the professors would at one point just be like, all right, no veterans can talk anymore. Now we need to hear from everybody else. And the truth of the matter is we bring so much life experience and so many different experiences and history and background to the table, that even in a classroom, we are an asset. And even in a workforce, we're an asset. And while mental health is extremely important, I don't want civilians or veterans to get wrapped up in the stigma that this is something that is overcomable. This is not a defining thing. PTSD is not a life sentence. It's not this stamp or the scarlet letter that you wear. This is something that we are resilient enough to overcome as a whole and as a nation.
Are there any closing thoughts as we recognize our veterans and we share, some insights?
I guess I'll just add, a lot of it just basically comes down to human nature. It's just communication and empathy mutually, like both ways. When I was on Capitol Hill, I was kind of seen as the token Marine at first in the office as an intern. And I was like a 27-year-old intern with these 18-year-old interns. And it was different for me, and I knew how I was being perceived. And I have a lot of knowledge as a Marine, but I don't know everything about the Marine Corps. And so when I showed up, that was one of the first things I made known is, I try to show a little humility. I have my experiences to share, and they're my personal experiences, but I'm also here to learn, and you have experiences and knowledge that I don't have, and I hope that we can learn from each other in this, and just showing a little bit of empathy and communicating that goes a long way in bridging the divide and really learning a lot about yourself and learning a lot about each other and really connecting everybody. I think that is just a human concept, and I think it's really important. And I think it's critical for veterans to transition out. I think it's very easy for when veterans get out to become reclusive and just say, civilians don't understand me, they don't get it, or to just get rid of their identity as a veteran completely. And I think both is harmful. I think it's important to have pride in your experience as a vet. I think it's valuable to society, your experiences as a veteran, your experience in the service. I think every veteran has a lot to offer. We all have different stories to offer. Every single one of us has a story. They're all different. And I think they're very, very valuable. I think it's very important to share those stories with civilians, though. We can't stay within our own communities. We need to make sure that we're bridging out and we're showing empathy and communication across the aisle. And I mean that across the aisle, a civilian military divide aisle. So I think that's just my final thought there.
Joel, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, Kirsten. I think one of the biggest things that we can do for one another, military, civilian, veteran, whatever color we are, whatever religion we are, whatever race we are, whatever background is, our experience are, is to just be kind to one another. And take the lesson from the military. I wish that this was something that we could instill in our nation as a whole, is that, regardless of where we came from or how old we are or what our beliefs are or what color we are, what we look like, what we sound like, we're all on the same team. We're all humans on this earth. We're all rotating at the same speed. We're all trying to just get by and make it happen. If we could just be kind to one another and get through this and understand that we're all in this together, that we would get much farther. I also do really want to drive home that the resilience of veterans and the importance of understanding the asset that we are to society and to our community and what it is that we can bring to the table is so important, and not lose sight of that, regardless of a diagnosis, regardless of a status in the military, regardless of anything else. And I'm shamelessly will plug, please, if you are able to, please shop small businesses and please support veteran-owned businesses. It is so important, and we need all of the help that we can get.
I would really encourage veterans that, if you, before you even think you need help, reach out and talk to somebody. And especially if you're in New York, you can go to getheadstrong.org, fill out a form. Somebody will be in touch with you within 24, 48 hours. We're in 28 other cities. We make it incredibly easy and remove all the potential barriers for people getting the help that they need.
It's an honor to talk with you all. Mr. Jeremy Butler is the CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. He served active duty in the Navy from 1999 to 2005 as a surface warfare officer. He transitioned to the reserves, where he is a U.S. Navy captain. Coming off of active duty, he started working for a DC-based government contractor and served in a variety of roles, including doing work for the Department of Homeland Security, the Joint Staff, and the Department of the Navy. Throughout, he spent several years back on active duty, both overseas and in the U.S., delivering our keynote for Forward Together, the transition from service member to veteran. Please welcome Captain Jeremy Butler.
Hello, and thank you all for tuning in for this Veterans Day event. Veterans Day is one that I think becomes increasingly important for individual veterans the longer that he or she is out of uniform. For many of us, when you're initially transitioning off active duty, you're pretty excited to be moving to a new chapter of your life, and therefore you probably haven't fully embraced, appreciated, or understood the new title of veteran, neither what it means to you personally or to the broader community in which you live. But regardless of your stage in that journey, I do want to say congratulations to each of you, regardless of your path here, your time in uniform, and now your work towards a college degree are major accomplishments that you should all be rightfully proud of. And thank you to Manhattan College for the invitation to speak with you today. I'm sorry that it has to be virtual, but that in no way diminishes my excitement to be able to connect with you all and be a part of this event. Transition is a standard part of military life. From the very beginning, the initial transition from civilian to boot recruit is perhaps the most jarring transition that we face in the military. Be it boot camp, officer candidate school, or even a military academy, I don't think anyone forgets that very first day of transition. I very distinctly remember getting dropped off by a friend for my first day of officer candidate school in Pensacola, Florida on a sunny day in October 1999. He was already a second lieutenant in the Air Force, and he was assigned to Pensacola for flight training. He'd recently completed his officer training, and he knew exactly what I was walking into. But once that first indelible first transition is complete, the military transition process becomes a pretty standard part of the life of a service member. Changing duty stations, changing ranks and getting promoted, deploying, returning from deployment. In many ways, transition is what military service is all about, and something that we learn to manage pretty darn well. So it may be surprising to service members and civilians, frankly, to learn that transition from service member back to civilian can be unexpectedly hard. In fact, for most, it's probably harder and more confusing than the move from civilian to service member. But the reason is actually pretty simple. For all the transitions that take place in uniform service, the entire military system is designed to support the soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, or Coastie and provide him or her with whatever is needed. Now that support doesn't always make the transition easy or mean that there aren't frustrating rules, but the guidance for what you need to do and generally how you need to do it is there for you. And the entire time that you're doing it, you're surrounded by a community that has probably been through the same situation or is actually going through it with you, especially when we're talking about really stressful transitions like preparing to deploy to a war zone. But then one day you decide it's time to get out, and suddenly you're pretty much on your own with generally incomplete but simultaneously overwhelming recommendations for how to start your new civilian life. There are definitely programs and checklists and best practices regarding the process for leaving the military. But every service has its own transition assistance program, as the programs are known in the military. TAP is the acronym. And while they've gotten better over the years, I wouldn't call them great. And I don't mean that as a slight to the services. The fact is, it's very hard to make a program that really gets to the needs of individuals transitioning out. Everyone's different. But ultimately, it's also the fact that every person going through the process has a very different work experience going on at the same time. When you're going through these classes, you're still on active duty. You still have a job to do, a military job to do. Now, some people transitioning are given total freedom by their bosses to leave their day job behind and focus on getting the most out of TAP class, the Transition Assistance Program. Others are trying to balance all the demands of their day job while also trying to pick out the key points from the class, which are usually 5 days or so long. Rarely is someone able to give their full time and attention to what is being taught in these classes, which unfortunately means that many service members find themselves dropped into the veteran community, not fully prepared to take on the very different challenges that life back in the civilian world presents. So too the transition from student to veteran. Even though all of you students were veterans probably when you were students, it's likely that student, especially if you're a full-time student, is the defining characteristic in your life right now. And like the service, institutes of higher education often provide you with much of what you need for your day-to-day life. A place to live, someone to give you guidance and instruction when you need it, a place to eat, a place to work out, maybe even healthcare, and certainly a community. There are no uniforms, but there are a certain amount of daily structure. But just like the day after you signed your DD 214 and were out on your own, the day after graduation, all that goes away. So I applaud Manhattan College for choosing the theme and topics of this event. Forward together, the transition from service member to veteran. Finding well-being, community, mission, and career. I like those. I graduated college in 1995. I joined the Navy in 1999 and have now been in the military for nearly 21 years, much of that time as a reservist. I worked in the private sector before and after my active duty time, and now I've been with Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America for over 5 years. Yet it was only recently that I fully realized and embraced the fact that finding the right balance of those elements, well-being, community, mission, and career, finding them in my own personal life is exactly what I've been searching for since I first started my post-college life. That is, in fact, what I think most Americans are searching for, and sadly, I don't think many of them find it in their careers. And while it's certainly not true for everyone in the military, for many, the difficulty with achieving a successful transition from service member to veteran, be that after a 4-year one-term enlistment or after a 20-year full career, is that the military actually provided each of those elements to make for a relatively fulfilled life for service members. It probably wasn't a perfectly balanced set of elements, and we often don't realize that all of them were there until we're actually out of the service and find that something in our lives is now lacking. What we at IAVA hear so often from veterans is that it's the sense of community and mission that are missing from their post-military lives. So my advice to you is simple. As you seek a career, also find ways to rebuild a sense of community and mission. It's very likely that in the civilian world, they will not be found in the same place as you find your career. And that's not an indictment on any career path or job that you may choose, but it's simply based off my personal experience. And again, what we often hear from veterans of all eras who are reaching out to IAVA seeking help and support. The good news is that there are many ways to achieve this, especially if you start thinking about it and looking for them now. I say this from experience. I left active duty, but immediately transitioned into the Navy Reserves. I started the process before I finished active duty so that the day after I was in the Navy Reserves. So on the civilian side, my priority was really finding a job, which I did relatively easy. I was entering the job market at a good time. Jobs were plentiful for junior officers, especially if you had a security clearance. It wasn't hard to find something. And that job provided me with all the things that most are looking for in a career, especially early on. It had good pay, good benefits, a stable work employment life. What it took me a while to realize, though, was that it did not provide me with two key things, a sense of mission or community. The job was great in many ways, but what I had not expected was how much I had relied on the Navy to provide me with both a sense of purpose and a diverse community of individuals that I genuinely enjoyed spending time with, both in and out of the work environment. As a result, I found myself seeking out opportunities to return to active duty, and over the next 10 years was regularly back on orders in uniform for assignments overseas and in the Pentagon. Some were involuntary mobilizations, but many of them were voluntary choices by my part to take advantage of some opportunities to go back into service. Ultimately, it was because of a decision that my wife and I made to move to New York City that I finally found that balance of well-being, community, mission, and career in one civilian job. Now, I'd known about IAVA for a long time, was familiar with the good work that they do, especially the work that they do in DC around advocacy, but what I didn't know is that they were headquartered in New York City. So once I learned that and reached out to them after several informational interviews, discussions, and finally actual job interviews, I was offered a job helping with fundraising for the organization. I honestly had known to turn this into a career, and I certainly didn't expect that 5 years later, I'd still be with IAVA, and really didn't expect that I'd be there as the new CEO. Truthfully, I actually didn't even really consider myself a veteran before I joined IAVA. I considered myself a reservist, but the fact is I'm both. And my other recommendation to you, to each of you who've served, is to embrace that title of veteran for yourselves. But what does that mean, to embrace the title of veteran? I'm not talking about wearing an I served hat or slapping a big Army vet bumper sticker on your car. Those are all personal choices, and you can go with whatever fits your personality. What I mean, and what I'd like for each of you, is to internally embrace the title of veteran and the moral responsibility that goes along with that designation. Now, don't get me wrong, there are many aspects of the veteran community that need to be improved. We need to increase VA services overall. We need to end the suicide epidemic that's rampant among our military and veteran communities. We need to expand support for women veterans. All these are examples that IAVA is fighting to improve upon through our advocacy work. But despite all that, there is arguably no better time to be a veteran than right now. The range of services and opportunities focused on helping and supporting veterans are vast. The country's opinion of veterans is strong and consistently positive. But taking advantage of the situation also means realizing that each of us is so much more than a veteran, and our personal ability to positively contribute to society will hinge on utilizing all of our defining characteristics to help unify, improve, and empower the country and hopefully the world. And that's not hyperbole. I'm not just throwing this out to try and inspire you with some big phrases. Each of you will be making a transition to a new stage in life, armed with two very valuable keys to being real leaders in your community. One of those is a college education, and the other is the honor of being a veteran of our armed forces. But remember that no matter how hard you work to get to this point, you are also now starting a new stage in life that will require even more hard work, learning, and sacrifice. No matter what you have done to get to this point, those factors never change and never go away. They are almost always necessary to find, maintain, and share success with others. So when I say embrace the title of veteran, I mean actively seek out community and fulfillment. Don't expect it to happen organically. The older you get, the harder that is to find. There is an incredible array of amazing organizations doing a variety of important work and also that are focused on connecting and empowering the veteran community, overcoming the civil-military divide, and simply making the country and the world a better place. Team Rubicon and the Mission Continues are incredible for community service. Hill Vets, Vets in Tech, Veterans on Wall Street, American Corporate Partners, all these organizations and others are focused on employment, mentorship, and job placement. With Honor is a nonpartisan political action committee, and you won't find those two phrases put together too often, but they're a nonpartisan political action committee focused on getting veterans elected to Congress, but only those that agree to work in a bipartisan fashion and put service over self. That's just a small sampling of what's out there. I encourage each of you to do some research on your own and find one to get started with. The time commitment can be as small or as large as your schedule allows, but I guarantee you that the rewards are huge. Bring a friend along if you can. Go alone if you can't. It doesn't matter. You're going to make connections and you're going to make new friends. You'll literally be helping to bridge the ever-expanding civil-military divide that exists in this country between those who've served and those who have no understanding really of what it means to serve in the military. But you also find personal fulfillment within your community. Every organization that's presenting during this event that was invited to speak to you today by Manhattan College, each is a tremendous resource. Each is a tremendous resource. They're all doing incredible work to support and empower the veteran community. And I didn't mention them by name only because I'd rather the representatives who are part of the program speak to you about what they're doing, but I highly recommend each of them to you. Now, you've hung up the uniform, but hopefully not the desire to continue to serve your country. Teach, tutor, mentor, volunteer, and encourage others to do the same. We all know how incredibly divided our country is, and I fear that regardless of who the next president will be, this division will continue. The veteran community and each of you individually can help to bridge that divide. Be responsible, engaged, thoughtful citizens. Listen more than you speak, never stop learning, get involved in your community in productive and supportive ways, and you'll make those around you better as well. The strength of the veteran community is in the power of our example. And in everything that you do, remember that you represent all of us. Your actions are what many will take to be the standard for the entire veteran community. Remember how it felt when you had on your uniform and you were out in town, off base, somewhere where people weren't used to seeing members of the military, especially those in uniform. Remember how you had to carry yourself a little bit straighter, be a little bit more attentive to everything that you were doing, because you knew that everybody that was looking at you as maybe one of the sole examples of an actual military person in person that they knew. You carried yourself a little bit straighter, and you were always aware of the example you were setting. Well, my recommendation, my last one to you, is carry yourself every day as if you are always wearing the uniform of a veteran. Set the example and live the example. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy, for your service, for your inspiring words, and for your continued work for our veterans. Our next discussion is around enhancing transition and developing careers for veterans, where veteran leaders discuss the challenges faced as well as the advantages that veterans have as they transition careers. James Dixon is Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Con Edison Clean Energy Business. He is a Manhattan College alumnus and has served in the United States Army Reserve, from which he retired as a major. Kwame Francis is Deputy Chief of Staff for the New York City Department of Veterans Services. He is a veteran of the war in Afghanistan and spent 8 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. as a financial auditor. Kwame was awarded the Presidential Bronze Award for community volunteer work by President Obama. Jeff McMillan is Managing Director and Chief Analytics and Data Officer at Morgan Stanley. He is also co-chair at Morgan Stanley's Veteran Employee Network. Mr. McMillan served on active duty as an armor officer and in Scout Platoon. What challenges or obstacles do veterans encounter when transitioning to careers in the civilian life?
Good morning. So I found that the biggest obstacles that veterans are encountering are the expectations of what they are leaving and where they're going. I had the pleasure of working with a number of folks who were transitioning from Special Forces through an organization called the Honor Foundation. And I found uniformly across the board with all of the people that I met with that they were concerned about the culture they were leaving and the culture they were entering on the business side. And I think that that is a real challenge and something that they need to think about as they transition, and that we as potential employers need to think about in addressing for them and finding the right fit for that cultural fit, because many of them are coming from high-performing teams, they're coming from exceptional circumstances and experiences. And they're looking for that in business, and sometimes that can be a letdown if they don't find it.
Yeah, I certainly would echo what Jim just said. I think, some veterans returning home have never held a civilian job, right? And so, let alone create a resume or been in a job interview. And so I think, they may speak in military jargon, and that can sometimes come off as aggressive when initially returning home. I also think it's just that shock of entering into this new world, this civilian world, as we veterans often refer to it as. It's just markedly different, and so you're used to going about your daily lives in a military, operating in a structured and systematic way, and you often, like I said, speak a different language, so to speak, and I think that does not always easily translate once you've left active service, right? So it's a real shock of all different things. And I think it's up to, the American population, our government, elected officials, whoever, people of influence, or everyday Americans to really, I think, meet the veteran community halfway, right? I think we all know that less than 1% or so serve in active service today. And so that military civilian divide sort of perpetuates and sort of makes it difficult for that transition to happen. So it really is a collaborative effort that's needed. But that's, to me, what I think is the most the biggest issue that veterans face when they're transitioning is that shock of just this new world, and it's just new space that they have not been accustomed to during their time in active service.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan.
Michael, first of all, thanks for having us. What a great topic. And Kwame and James, thank you for your service. From my experience, the biggest challenge that the men and women face leaving the military is that while so much of what they learn in the military is really applicable to success in the civilian career, a lot of it's not. So the military really teaches you it's all about the team and this idea of sort of self-promotion and really saying, I'm an exceptional person. It's almost frowned upon in many ways. And the truth is, if you want to be successful in the civilian world and you actually want to find a job, you got to step out a little bit. You actually have to be able to say, this is what's really good about me, and this is how I can contribute to an organization. And it's really hard for men and women of uniform to do that. It's very unnatural. And a lot of what our organization does, and I'm sure what my fellow panelists do, are really trying to coach these men and women to talk about their exploits, to talk about how they contribute, because their civilian counterparts, it comes very naturally, and it's very, very difficult for folks in uniform to do it.
And identifying opportunities, what strengths do veterans bring when a veteran is seeking a career, and how do you spotlight that?
Well, the biggest thing that veterans bring to the equation is, in my view, is that veterans are terrific problem solvers. They know how to break down issues, and they know how to do it in very chaotic and challenging situations. You combine that with the ability to plan, the ability to organize, and the ability to lead, these are skills that are pretty much applicable to every single industry. And then what you need to do is you need to take those skills, those core competencies, and you need to play them back to the person you're talking to on the other side of the interview table or the other side of the Zoom conversation, and share with them how these skills might be applicable to the job that you're actually interviewing. And much of that has to do with learning the lingo of the job you're talking about, having conversations with people that do the job on a day-to-day basis, which is another area that veterans are often challenged, where you really have to educate yourself on the job. So if you want to work at Con Ed, you got to talk to people at Con Ed. You want to work in my business, you got to talk to people in my business. And if you can learn the lingo, and then your job is to help the interviewer translate your skills and see how these unique skill sets you have actually could be a really advantageous to their organization.
Ahmed, how do veterans leverage their unique skill sets?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Jeffrey. And I think, he alluded to that effectiveness under stress, right? I think in any sort of large scale organization in a civilian world, or startups even, that effectiveness under stress, dealing with sort of a lot of uncertainties is a unique sort of thing that I think veterans are well experienced in. And I think that is truly what it is. I think veterans have a lot of different strengths that they can leverage. And I think it does take practice to really talk about it. And we always talk about networking in a general way, but I think getting out there and sharing your experiences and talking about your story is really where the practice begins, right? So a number of things that I think about when it comes to leverage the strength of veterans, right? I think veterans are some of the most adaptable employees I think any organization can have, will have. We're used to, taking on new assignments and learning from them quickly at moment's notice. I think there's a level of we're diligent and we won't quit until the job is done. It's that whole mission accomplishment concept that's sort of ingrained in who we are as veterans. And also all veterans possess, I think, that intangible quality of leadership, right? We're not afraid to step up and take charge of a team. And I think those are the elements I think that any veteran brings to an organization. In terms of leveraging it, how can they do that? I think part of it, again, is practicing, right? It's getting out there and putting one foot in front of the other and really engaging with people that, have a different experience from you, because everyone does in the civilian world, right? So I think that practice of just really, taking the initiative, which is a quality and a trait that we all have as veterans, really putting that into play. And I think once, sometimes, we have a saying called slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I think once you do that practice and put it into play, I think the results are always usually beneficial and in their favor, in our favor.
James, please share your perspective on and identifying and spotlighting strengths that are particular strengths veterans bring.
I agree with so much that the panelists have just put out. And two things I want to extract, because I think from a business perspective, they're the most valuable and the hardest to develop. And one is execution mindset. The military really builds that into people. It's a job where you can't fail. There's no, you've got to succeed, and you've got to get to whatever the mission is that you're doing, you have to accomplish it. And that execution mindset that it takes to plan, to get ready, to step off, and to do whatever it is that you need to do is so valuable to businesses. And the second point, I think, is leadership. Business managers are managers, but some are not very good leaders. And it's hard. I think, some people say leaders are born, leaders are made. I think the military does make leaders. And I don't think it matters what experience you have in the military. You're always thinking about your position, what it means to those around you, and also what it means if those above you are no longer there to do their job, and what you need to do in order to fill that gap and move forward the mission and move forward whatever it is that you're doing. And I think military people carry that with them in a way that I've never seen developed in business school or in business training or in anything that we do in business. And that's something I think that is really, really valuable that they bring with them.
And, with those strengths, what about identifying the opportunities and finding that focus and then, carrying through with that? Like, are there any suggestions that you have with that on those strategies for that, James?
I think they have to come out with expectations. They have to understand that life in the civilian world is going to be different than what they experience in the military world, that the structure is not going to be the same. It's not a command and control structure. You can't give an order and expect others to carry it out. You have to have soft skills that work well for you and find a place that you can exercise those soft skills to both your benefit as a leader in that new organization and to the organization's benefit. And that cultural fit and finding the right fit is what they need to think about. And in part of it, the conversation with a new employer or a potential employer, I think, has to be about that expectation. What is the individual veteran looking for? And teasing out from whoever they're talking to is what is your culture? What do you believe in? What are your values? And making sure that all of that aligns. And I think if you can get there, there'll never be perfect alignment, but if you can get there on 90% or 80% of what you really want and what's important to you, you can really find a place that you can be comfortable in and succeed. And I think it's important for veterans not to underestimate how important that conversation is in finding that right cultural fit.
Kwame, in transitioning from military service to the professional world and civilian life, what are some strategies veterans can utilize to identify opportunities and pursue that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And there's no one solution, frankly, because it depends on where you are, what city you are. Like New York City is vastly different of that of San Antonio and that of San Diego. So it really is about. I think it really takes the will to really just get out there and see what's there, right? So if I could speak for New York City, I'm at the Department of Veteran Services for New York City, which is separate and apart from the VA at the federal level. And a lot of what we focus on is, to connect, mobilize, and empower veterans, right? So that's entrepreneurship, that's in, housing, and just sort of helping veterans find employment. And so a lot of what we do is through, it's partnership based, right? We partner with a lot of different organizations. If a veteran goes to our website at nyc.gov/vets, they will see a whole host of resources there that's available to them to help them really reach a better place. So what we try to do is we're trying to work right now with the DoD and identifying veterans who are returning back to New York City, so that we can, have the first touch point with them to say, hey, what is it that you need? What are your goals? How can we help you do that, right? And so part of that is, connecting with the different colleges and universities in New York City and helping them and, making sure that they are, accessing the resources that are available to them. I think part of that is just also, in sharing your experiences as a veteran, I think we have to try to refrain as best as we can from utilizing military jargon. And like, again, that's something that takes practice, right? I think you have to go out there and find opportunities. You have to, take a full look at your LinkedIn profile, your social media, who you're engaging with, right? Are there people who you can learn from in different spaces, whether it's in the classroom? And I think it really takes it's almost a Herculean effort to really do, because, most people don't have or share that veteran experience. So you really have to really get out there and really make the effort, right? But we have places, resources at DVS here in New York City to help veterans do that, right? I can't speak for other places, but I know in particular New York City, we are well positioned as the veteran hub in the city to ensure that veterans have an opportunity to thrive, whether that's in our contracting process. We have special sort of carve-outs for veterans to do so. At the state, the Service Disabled Veteran Owned Business Program at the state level. So we in New York State and New York City in particular have a lot of resources. So I encourage any veteran that is watching this to please reach out to us. We'd love to help you out and reach a better place.
Jeff, can you share some thoughts for veterans transitioning from military careers to a civilian career?
Yeah, I'll take a slightly different bent on this. I'd agree with my fellow panelist. But what I would say is the biggest problem that I see in veterans is they don't know what they want to do. And they spend a lot of time having a lot of conversations that end up going nowhere because they haven't clearly articulated what they want to achieve. And I always say, if you're a veteran, you're in one of two stages. Either you're trying to figure out what you want to do, or you figured out what you want to do, and then you're looking for a job. And you say to yourself, if you're in step A, then what you do is you have hundreds of conversations and you ask people what they do, what do they like, what do they not like about their job? And you say, these are the skills and competencies I have. How would a person with my skills do in this job? Is it a good fit? Is it a bad fit? And you start to narrow the types of roles and opportunities to where you get to a couple of professions that seem to make sense. And then once you're there, then the conversation shifts to, hey, Kwame, I'm really interested in working in a project manager role in a major technology company. What resources do you have available to me for someone that's focused on that? Mm-hmm. His organization's ability to help an individual that has that specific question, and I have never worked with you, Kwame. Sounds like you do great work. But his ability, I'm going to bet you that his ability's organization to help that individual is far greater than the individual who walks off the street and says, hey, I'm looking for a job, right? The more specific you can be about your ask, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and you can also change your mind, right? We're not asking you to sign up for life, but the more specific you can be in what you want to do, the more resources can come to bear. And then the last thing I'll say is once you know what you do, you gotta go after it hard. You gotta talk to 50, 100, 200 people. You gotta leverage the resources at the local, state, federal level. You gotta put your resume out there. You gotta post on LinkedIn. You know, the best advice someone told me when I was getting out is like shooting the ball from half court. You throw it up once, it's not going in. You throw it up 1,000 times, eventually the ball is going to go in the hoop. And you know what? It's a lot of work, but that's what you got to do to be successful.
So yeah, Jeff, can I jump in real quick? If I could just add to that really quickly. Yeah, I totally agree with Jeffrey on that. And I think part of it is also expectation management. I think a lot of veterans, you get out the military, you are a sergeant, you are a captain, a colonel even, and you think that, you know, you've amassed these amount of skills and you're well credentialed, and you may in fact be, but I think it's just understanding that you may not get that senior executive position right away, but maybe a year or two down the lane, you may get that position, right? So I think part of it is managing expectations. I also think second to that is also following up, right? I think, you know, you could meet 50 to 200 people, but if you're not following up, then, you know, nothing materializes, right? You can go to an event and you get tons of business cards. I always like to tell people, you know, there's a 24 to 48 hour window before that person you engage with forgot the conversation. So part of it is expectation management and also following up.
And all three of you have been there in that transition from military service to, you know, building a career in civilian life. And what do you think, thinking back and reflecting on the then and now, you know, what are some do's and don'ts, even when it comes to, you know, writing your resume and, you know, engaging in interviews? And once you have identified what you want to do, what are some do's and don'ts?
Don't use mil-speak. You know, I think I heard that earlier from both Jeffrey and Kwame, that, you know, it's important to be able to translate what you've done in the military to business skills that people can understand. And I recall a conversation I had with an artillery officer who came to see me just to have that conversation. And he said, I have no business skills. I was part of a fire control team that, you know, fired rounds downrange. And I said, but think of the process that you went through, and, you know, the analytics and the mathematics and the communication and the planning and the logistics, and to be able to hit a target that you can't even see. I said, now take all of that and translate it to things that business people would want to hear and would want to have somebody in their organization be able to do. And I think they really need to think about that. And talking to others who have gone through it and understand that translation, I think is really, really helpful. I think the soft skills and making sure that they talk about their soft skills are important, because you think about it, a staff sergeant who's briefed the general. I would love to have somebody like that in my organization who could stand in front of my CEO and be able to talk to them with confidence and to give them the essence of whatever it is they're trying to communicate. That soft skill is something that takes an awful long time in business to develop. And in the military, they're coming out with those things already. The leadership again, stressing the leadership component and what they've learned and how they lead and what they know about leadership rather than managing. And they're very, very different skills, right? Managing is a skill. Leadership is really, really hard. And it is something that I think every single veteran carries with them. And highlighting performance, I think Jeff talked about it before. I think it is a real problem for people coming out of the military to be able to talk about themselves and talk about what they did and their greatness and the skills that they're bringing. And they have to be able to do that because that is what business is about. And that's what finding a job is about, right? It's self-promotion and making sure that you put your best self forward so that people can evaluate that and determine whether you're the right fit for what they need.
Kwame, in transitioning, what are some do's and don'ts, including for resume building and interviewing?
Yeah, certainly. I think in addition to what I mentioned earlier about expectation management and following up, I think in addition to following up, I think it's, following through, right? The things that you've committed to in conversations, like, I would like to grab coffee or whatever, remind those people of those conversations. So that's just an additive there. But with respect to resume building, certainly, we all, and I think said it, and I think it's worth emphasizing, is, don't, refrain from military jargon. So if you think about, if you're a platoon leader, right, what does that mean? Am I, a platoon leader of, infantrymen, or if I'm a supply chief, or what does that mean? What can that translate to? Where you're a supervisor or a warehouse operations manager, for example, that could be another translation. So it's just like really tinkering with words and trying to find how you can sort of, translate your experience. I think don't diminish your experience. And I think, Jim, we've all mentioned it here. There's a lot of skill sets and, translatable skill sets into the civilian world that I think veterans are not aware of or just not thinking through enough about. Think about, like you said, whether it's artillery, the mathematical equation that goes on into that, the level of, decisiveness, judgment that entails. So you really don't diminish your experience, not because you haven't figured it out right away, like what this means or what this can translate to. Don't sort of diminish your experience as lesser than. Also, I think, it's a time game. I think it's, just be patient with the process. With respect to resume building, I think try to, in interviewing process, certainly don't show up in your military uniform. You really want to show that, that you've, have a sense of, situational awareness. I think it's really trying to, figure out what works, tailor fit in your experiences to the job that you're applying to. So you're looking at, okay, what have I done in the military? And this is what the job description is. And how is my experience relatable to this? So I think that's some tidbits, in addition to everything that was already said.
And thank you. And Jeff, some do's and don'ts for transitioning.
Just to round it out, what I would say is people don't really care about the job that you did. They want to hear about how that job connects to the work that you're doing. So before you walk into that interview, you want to look at the resume and you want to ask yourself, what on this resume actually is going to apply to the job I'm going to talk to that interviewer. And they don't care that you were the battalion maintenance officer or you worked at 272 armored such and such, right? Throw all that out to the side and ask yourself, what about this job was applicable? And then what I always tell people is tell a story about it, right? Don't list the experience, tell the story about that experience, right? And in telling that story, you are showing how you are a relatable person, right? How you are connected, how you're a warm and empathetic person, and you're also selling your skills to that individual. And the last thing I'll say is you gotta find the balance between being the tough, hard-nosed, disciplined person that they expect you are, but also being a warm and humble creature who is grateful for the opportunity. And you gotta balance those two things in equal measures to be successful in that interview process.
Thank you. In closing, can each one of you share some key takeaways for veterans to help facilitate career transition and thrivability?
Once you've done all this, your journey really begins. And that means you want to walk in the door of your first day, and you want to make as many friends as you possibly can. You want to build a solid base. You'll learn the content, right? That will be fine. But what's going to make you successful long-term in your career is the relationships you build. And my recommendation is build a lot of them, make them super strong, and keep them for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think for me, my biggest advice would be to ask questions, ask more questions, follow-up questions, ask questions, keep asking questions, and then that's how you learn. Because there's a lot of things that veterans, we as veterans don't know as soon as we've left active service. So ask a lot of questions. Another thing is to be flexible. I think that flexibility will allow you to sort of embrace the challenges that you will encounter. And the mistakes that will be made, right? And knowing that that's okay. In the military, any sort of mistakes, no matter how small it may be, it could be severely consequential, right? And so in the civilian world, yes, you will make mistakes, and it's not always as deadly consequential. So like, be kind to yourself in that regard as well. So those would be my tidbits: is ask a lot of questions, be flexible, and embrace mistakes.
I think that is so important, to be able to communicate well to others what you have and what you bring and how it's going to make their organization better. It's going to make you very valuable. And there's a lot of value in veterans, and they probably don't see it because they don't equate it to business right off the bat. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to ask for help. These are great. The city has resources, federal government has resources. There's private resources out there. Get that resume, get it in front of somebody who can take a look at it for you, and make sure that, it does all the things that we just talked about, and put your best self forward.
Thank you, James, Kwame, and Jeff, for your service, for your commitment, and for your engagement in helping to identify opportunities for our veterans. Dr. Stephen Kaplan is a professor of religious studies and director of Veterans at Ease at Manhattan College. Dr. Kaplan recently published Combating Transition Stress Among Student Veterans, Building a Community from the Ground Up, in the Journal of the Association of American Colleges, and he's here to present for us now.
Greetings. My name is Stephen Kaplan. I'm professor at Manhattan College in the Department of Religious Studies. I am also the director of the Veterans at Ease program. It is my honor to provide the closing remarks, essentially thank you remarks. Let me begin by saying thank you to BronxNet. Their talents and diligence has been enormous in helping us put this together. I would also like to thank each of our speakers. They have spoken brilliantly and passionately. They have taught us and told us about the values of resilience, of well-being, of careers, of community. Each of those values are the values that lie behind the Manhattan College Veterans Program. I want to say a few words about our program in order to provide those at other colleges who might be interested in thinking about the kinds of things that we have found successful, things that we have found that produce results for our student veterans, which means increased retention rates, increased graduation rates, and a sense of well-being and community among our SVO, Student Veteran Organization. Let me begin with the obvious. 18-year-olds coming out of high school who have been taking exams and looking for phony proof. They're not the natural peer group, the natural community for our student veterans who are older, more experienced, and have spent several years, at least, in the military. Therefore, they come to campus without that community. What we have done and what we're going to suggest here is that we find ways to allow our veterans to create or build community. At Manhattan College, we have done that by providing an opportunity for each incoming veteran to take the same course. We use one required course that all students at Manhattan College have to take. Happens to be one of the courses I teach, a course in religious studies. You can use whatever course. It could be chemistry, it could be history, it could be English courses. We find that if we put all our incoming veterans into two sections, 50% veterans, 50% general ed students, we do not isolate the veterans, but we give our student veterans an opportunity to meet other student veterans and to begin the process of creating a community. They know who the other veterans are now. In addition, Manhattan College has offered for the last 5.5 years the opportunity to all our student veterans to participate in a 4.5 day retreat program. This retreat program, which we have been running with Warriors at Ease at an ashram, a yoga retreat in the Bahamas, not only builds community, it gives student vets and the faculty who accompany them, me very often, thankfully, an opportunity to bond, to get to know each other as human beings. And in that process, with Warriors at Ease and other folks at the yoga retreat, we teach a variety of stress reduction techniques. These techniques are good in dealing with transition stress. They're good in confronting exams, writing papers, and general life practices. Veterans can use what they want and discard the rest. If there are 18 breathing techniques, use 2. People don't have to go to the Bahamas. People can go to a local retreat. We have done this during COVID on campus for a full day, a variety of activities. These activities build community, and that group of incoming student veterans then feel comfortable participating in the larger SVO activities. Our SVO activities include lectures, academic lectures to the entire college community, whether they be about military and the peace, or minorities in the military, or enlisting post 9/11. These kinds of activities have allowed our veterans to be recognized on our campus. Manhattan College is honored to have them. My faculty colleagues appreciate their presence on our campus. It is my hope that other colleges and organizations will think about these principles. Do it as it works for you, but try from the very beginning to build community and build bonds. And those bonds come from getting them together in class and, in a setting that is very relaxed. Let me conclude by saying once again, thank you to everyone who has participated in this event. Thank you for all who have served. And thank you to Manhattan College for supporting this. We do well by doing good. I hope to see you all next year marching down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And if not, we're planning to do this virtual event now on an annual basis. Stay well, stay healthy, and stay in touch.
Thank you to our panelists and veteran leaders for the engaging discussions, insights, and the vital information shared. The transition from service member to civilian can be difficult. We as a community recognize our veterans, but we as a community need to be there for our veterans with support in providing a sense of purpose, networking, jobs, opportunities, and more. Thank you to the Manhattan College and BronxNet teams that helped put this together, including Tiana Sloan of Veteran Success, and Robert Walsh, and BronxNet producer Yesenia Ramos. Thank you to our veterans for your service and sacrifice for our nation. For BronxNet and with Manhattan College, let's keep connected and keep building community together.
I'm Herb Barrett, born and raised in the Bronx. I ride my bicycle all over the place, or used to. And one day I happened to see something through the fence and it looked like odd, and it was one of these memorials. And I said, what the heck's that memorial sitting there all by itself? So I started inquiring, and I found out this was a memorial that was started back in 1949 by a veterans group. With the support of Governor / Senator Lehman, this memorial was put together. It was in terrible, terrible condition. The plaques were missing, the whole monument was missing. This one over here right on the front happened to be buried completely. I just happened to dig it up. And I was bothering the Parks Department, and Parks Department, the community board, and local politicians carried on to restore this grove. There used to be 2 trees there and 2 or 3 monuments, and that's why I put in a row of flags to fill in the area. And I use this to make a hole in the ground. If you stand over here, you'll see.
I've had the pleasure of meeting Herb Barrett here a few years ago, and to understand the history of what it took to be able to bring this back to life. It takes one person that has the conviction and the tenacity and the persistence to make sure that something is recognized and appreciated.
There are also 2 monuments here, one for a gentleman named Sergeant Barcelone, and another one, Sergeant Cornelius, and the 2 of them were honored in the military for their bravery, and they are awarded the Medal of Honor. Cornelius has a park actually in the South Bronx, someplace around 165th Street. The boys from Manhattan College are due here shortly.
So right now we're at this place called Dogwood Junction. It was created as part of the New York City Green Streets program to improve air quality, reduce temperatures, heat island effect, that kind of stuff. Raking up weeds by putting down mulch. We're increasing the air content in the soil, and it's going to increase the permeability. So the water's going to be able to soak in the dirt better rather than just flow off the asphalt into the sewers.
We're right on the edge of Manhattan College campus. We have hundreds of students that live right up on the hill, and they walk by this area every day. You can't imagine what we pulled out of this, but I think this is a pretty powerful message of Manhattan College coming together. Our student veterans, our volunteers, our basketball team.
We're right outside, right off campus, right off Broadway, right across from Cortlandt Park and the plaza. And we're here turning this around. Don't ever underestimate the impact you can have to another person just by being a good person or extending an olive branch, or just being there for them. It could be the littlest gesture, but in times like this, it makes all the difference. We want to really create the standard of being there for others, being a we guy, not a me guy.
This is a real tribute to the student volunteers, to the student veterans. You look at Memorial Grove, 21 oak trees, a place where Bronx veterans who died in the war are recognized. And we have Veterans Day around the corner. What a great tribute to those veterans and to our current veterans for participating in this service day.
Yes, we did find a Mazziello. Yeah.
Yeah. Rob called me last night. We were actually talking about that there's a Masiello in there, and I immediately spoke to some of my father's family who comes from the Bronx, and I'm really interested to find out who it is, kind of trace my lineage and my ancestors. You know, it's humbling, and I'm honored just to have our last name in that.
Our pleasure to meet you, Steve Maciel. Very nice to meet you. How are you?
Well, if you need about 15 guys right up on that hill, you need the basketball team to do anything, we're here for you.
Isn't that wonderful? We have a monument here honoring the Gold Star mothers. It's an important monument. People have forgotten when a member is killed in that family during service, they change flags to a gold star. As much as the soldiers need to be remembered that are named in this grove, I think the Gold Star mothers need to be remembered just as well.
It's a wonderful place of contemplation, to contemplate and think about the people that sacrificed so much to have this country be free and safe. So I want to thank Herb for his persistence, and I want to thank Manhattan College for having their students come out to take care of a triangle that we have here on Broadway, and also to come here and help us take care of the Memorial Grove.
I was in the Army for 7 years, active duty. Right now, I'm the current Vice President of the Student Veterans Organization at Manhattan College. I'm an electrical engineer major. I served in Afghanistan for 8 months. I was assigned to 3rd Special Forces Group. I was airborne. When I got here, it was really hard to see the stones. I was just able to see the flags. But now that everything is clear up, it looks so nice.
This is a community at work. Look at this. Look at these generous young men and women who are doing this. What a community to do this. And Mr. Herb Barrett, who has taken Memorial Grove into his heart and under his wing for over 14 years. So Parks Department, the volunteers, and Herb deserve so much credit for this day.
Today, November 8th, we did a ceremony here in front of Memorial Grove. That's in Van Cortlandt Park on the edge of Broadway and west to 46th Street. Ceremony we do here is to recognize the Grove, to recognize all veterans.
It is a living memorial, and it was started in 1949 by a local post of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and we must remember all of the efforts of the veterans who survived, and we must remember the sacrifice of the veterans who did not.
It's important that veterans be recognized, and I'm glad here.
We're always glad to have people come up and recognize us as veterans, and we appreciate the folks who come up and say, hey, thank you for your service.
This flag is fitting for today.